Another risk factor, especially if the person is internalizing rejection from losing a job or not being able to find another job. You see a lot of progression of addiction during this period of when people lose jobs. The chemically dependent person use may have been hindered by their job, and now with more free time and a greater sense of dissatisfaction, the person turns more to their drug of choice. Recent divorces, separations. It's not only a risk factor for suicide, but also another time when you may start to see a greater progression of the disease. A person may have been tempered by their spouse, and when they leave, that spouse leaves, they may start to see more and more use, or they might start to use more and more, and a downward spiral begins. Legal problems are a risk factor for suicide. The legal system is also where our society in large part sends those who suffer from this disease. Jails, prisons, and probation offices are common places in the lives of those who are addicted to drugs and alcohol. Social isolation. Social networks are a major protective factor. For those who are going through difficult times, when they isolate, they start to lose these connections that are so important in one's well-being. Proneness to negative affect. This is just a fancy way of saying that these folks feel negative feelings like guilt, shame, anger, and sadness more often than positive emotions. Individuals high in negative affect will exhibit on average higher levels of distress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. These individuals tend to focus on their unpleasant aspects of themselves, the world, and their future, and other people. Misfortunes are oftentimes seen as permanent, pervasive, and out of their control, as opposed to those with proneness to positive affects who think of their misfortunes as temporary, isolated, and within the person's ability to change. If anybody who wants to read further on this subject, they should check out a book called Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman. Talks a lot about how we view these, how we view the world and how it affects whether or not we're prone to negative affect or positive affect. All right. Aggression, impulsivity. Everyone deals with some anger or some impulsive actions, but those who let these things dominate their decision-making do not tend to think through decisions and weigh consequences. They may think about immediate gratification, and when alcohol and other drugs enter the scene, they become even more impulsive or volatile. Firearm ownership. I would like to get to this a little bit later, but what I would like to say about this is it is the most lethal means. More people die by firearms than any other method. If a person is suicidal, or feeling suicidal, you need to restrict firearms. Over 54% of all suicide deaths are by firearms. This becomes even more lethal when alcohol is involved. Remember, we talked about how in approximately 30 to 40% of all suicide deaths, the person was acutely intoxicated.